My name is Joe Adebato. I'm the Director of Counseling here at the high school. We appreciate, again, you making the time to come to this. This will be recorded by BCAT. All our counseling events are recorded by BCAT. We post everything on the BCAT site. So, if you know of anyone that missed tonight and wants to watch it, they can feel free to eat some popcorn and watch this at home. So the way we structure this event and our other counseling evening events, each of the counselors that are here tonight are going to talk about something in relation to the college application process. Please know we're going to be discussing quite a bit of information. This information really isn't communicated this way to your children. We do that over the course of a couple of months. So this process, the college process, really started last spring with juniors, and it's continuing now with seniors in the fall. But we do think it's important that students and parents kind of get this overview so you have an idea of what to expect this fall. And so, again, each counselor will take a piece of the presentation tonight. And as we kind of just go through the night, feel free to ask questions as each counselor wraps up their section. And again, we'd like to certainly stay for any questions you may have at the completion of this event. So this is just the names of the high school counselors. We do have a new counselor, new this year, not a new counselor to the business of school counseling, Mrs. Amanda Murphy. She has taken over from Mrs. Gloria Wotazik. Gloria still works in the school system. She is now working as a family and community liaison. So Amanda took over. Amanda was here way back in 2010 and 2011, and she was filling in for maternity leave at that time. And now she's worked in Danvers and Duxbury. Unfortunately, we have Amanda back. So we were happy with Amanda adding to the staff this year. And then the other thing to be aware of are the two secretaries in our office. I think this is the year when parents will probably really get to know them, especially if you're calling in regard to transcripts and questions around transcripts. Senior year, there's other things that may happen throughout the year. Again, whether it be transcript-related, college-related, scholarship-related. So Mrs. Teresa Kavanaugh and Mrs. Marisol Goncalves, they're both in the counseling office, and students that are here, you probably know who they are. They're the two secretaries as you walk in. And then, so where should seniors be right now in the process? So again, just like teachers have a curriculum in the classroom, we as counselors follow something called a developmental model. And we try to make sure we're adhering to certain things each school year for students, certain standards. And so really, junior year is about that initial exposure to post-secondary options, whether it be colleges, careers. And this fall, this is some of the things we'll be doing with those students, again, specifically for college. We do have other students in the senior class that decide to go into a career or the military. And again, our goal is to work with all students to help with post-secondary planning. But as we know, tonight is specifically around college. So finalizing college lists. So really juniors last year and seniors this year, that's kind of where students should be. A lot of students already have a set list, which is great. Other students are still tweaking it a little bit. But again, that's kind of where you should be, that research component. Choosing what option, you'll hear more about this later, but college and universities have different options that you can choose when you apply. And you'll hear more about that in a little while. And then determine and communicate deadlines to counselors and recommenders. So part of this process is not necessarily within the student's control. For example, letters of recommendations from teachers and counselors. You have to make sure you request those, and we have to wait. So I think one of the best things students could do is to reach out to those teachers to make sure they have, in fact, you've either requested the letter, maybe you did it last spring, which a lot of students do, or you're doing it this fall. But again, that is an important piece because that takes time. And through the application process, you'll learn quickly that it's multiple pieces coming together at the right time. And so timeliness is definitely an important factor. Okay, now I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Diozzi.
Thank you. Welcome. So while there are a couple things I'm going to cover, and that ties into Mr. Adabato's slides. One is sort of the research of colleges, the conceptual, do I want to be in Washington, D.C., do I want to major in music, like those really big questions. And then we also have these real little nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of the application. So students are kind of balancing both things in the same time frame. There are a lot of ways to still research colleges besides online. They have really, really wonderful resources online, as you probably know, ever since COVID. You definitely want to contact the schools directly, go to things like open houses are actually really, they tend to be major specific. For example, like an engineering open house, you have more interaction with professors. So if you have an opportunity to go to an open house, I think those can give you a really good idea of what the college is about. We've also started having visits to Burlington High from college reps. Students have already probably attended some of those. We've had about 6 colleges so far, and we have probably 50 more coming. And that visit is very similar to the college information session. Virtual college fairs, they can be a little overwhelming, but if you're doing something specific like art or music, those can also be really helpful because it's major-based. We put a smattering of in-person college fairs on the slide, but I think, do we have a list of those as well? These are the ones we know about so far. We'll keep sharing that information with students as we know about in-person fairs. And while I have you here, if you have younger kids, these in-person fairs are also great for 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. Demonstrated interest is when a student uses one or many more of the above to show the college that they want to attend. Some more selective colleges like to think that if they are extending an invitation to you to their school, that you will in fact show up if they invite you. So they're trying to get a sense of whether or not you're really serious about attending if you get admitted, and showing demonstrated interest helps them know that a little bit clearer. So one of the things you want to narrow down is, what are your reach schools, what are your realistic schools, and what are your safety schools? Reach schools are schools for which your stats, like your GPA and your test scores if you're using them, are either slightly under what the college is looking for, or it's just a highly competitive college with a very low acceptance rate. So some students, realistic schools are other students' reach schools, so this is a spectrum. A realistic school is where all of your stats match with the average admitted student to that college. It matches their data as well. We tend to use the word realistic, but the word target is also used. And then a safety school is where it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that you will get in. But what we really want is for students to want to go to their safety schools and to want to go to their realistic schools. One of the things that I found a pattern over the years that students, the students who can get the most stressed or upset in my office at one point during this process in the fall, it's because they didn't have enough realistic schools and they're starting to panic. So usually we sit down, we regroup, and that's okay. But that can be a stressor if too many of the schools are reach. And then last but not least, we want to talk about financial safety schools. That's a school that a family would find affordable. Every college is required to have a price calculator on their website. They're required by the federal government to have that. And also, a financial safety school could mean that they have merit aid, and they have different ways of getting money other than just what you say qualify for on the FAFSA. Here's a sampling of what the reach, realistic, and safety, what the reach schools tend to look like. Northeastern has become incredibly competitive over the last, I would say, 10 years. And UMass Amherst has become very competitive, most notably their honors program, which has become hard to predict, I guess. So that's just a smattering of what that looks like. And then we have highly competitive majors like nursing, physical therapy, engineering. When you're deciding to apply, the standard of admission is still regular decision. And every college has what's called a regular decision deadline. That's just it's really when all the applications need to be in by for the entire incoming class. Most of us, older folks who applied to college, there really was only a regular decision. At least there was when I went to college. So that deadline tends to be from January to March. Like, for example, UMass Amherst regular decision deadline is still January 15th, which is still pretty early. And we'll talk about the candidate reply date in a second. Early action, I always remind my students that the A in action, think of early action, early answer. All early action really does is give you an answer sooner. It can help alleviate the stress, get everything done. For some programs like nursing, they're going to require that you apply early action. It might also be the same for recruited athletes. Some colleges do want you to apply on the early side. So you would apply usually in November. For schools in the South, it might be as early as October 15th, and that you get your answer usually around the holiday break, which also might, or in early December, which would give you a time to regroup if you wanted to send out more applications, regular decision. And your applications can be a mix of all these deadlines. Restrictive early action is rare. It's only 6 schools like Georgetown, Notre Dame, Harvard, Princeton have restrictive early action, and that means that you have to just indicate that you can do, that you're just applying restrictive early action to one of those 7 schools, and you can't do early decision to another. Early decision. Early decision, I think of early decide. It means you've decided to go there if you get in. So when you apply early decision, it's usually to a more competitive school. Not all schools offer early decision, but it's because you have a really strong interest in that school. You've hopefully done some of the math to figure out its affordability for your family, and you want to, and you also, it would be somewhat realistic. For example, you'd have the admissions criteria, the GPA that they're looking for. Once you're admitted, you're expected to attend. Your parents, and you have to sign a contract saying that you're committing to early decision. There are some parameters around that. For example, if you get into early decision, you're supposed to rescind all of your applications, all of your pending applications to other schools. And once you've been admitted, we can no longer send transcripts to any other colleges. And then you will notice, though, there's also early decision 1 and early decision 2. So sometimes we have students who apply early decision. They may not get into that particular school, and then we regroup and they apply early decision 2 for a second school, and that is the same level of commitment. If you're deferred from an early decision school and you go into the regular decision pool, you're released from the early decision contract. However, you have shown that you will probably go if you get in. And then rolling admission are schools that just take the applications as they're received. When we send materials to colleges, there's probably a frantic group of interns processing the test scores and the essay and the credit card payment. And then once that file is marked complete, then the admissions officers will batch read all of the applications. So at many schools, they'll read all of Burlington's applications together. That rep will read them all at once. A rolling candidacy means that the reps just read every application as it comes in. So it's just ongoing, and they take the application, admit, and it's a quicker way to get an answer. Usually you get an answer within 3 weeks to a month. So the Massachusetts state colleges, well, sorry, they're all state universities now. They're all still test optional. They have no intention. Most of them are saying they have no intention of using test scores again. UMass Amherst said that again at their college admissions visit last week. They might have some test requirements for specific majors. I don't know of any off the top of my head, but it's always something to just cross-check on the website or ask in an admission session. And then in order to get into a state college or university, your GPA has to be at least a 2. When they recalculate it on their end, they're also looking for a 3. And then for the more competitive UMasses, it's usually upwards of well over 3, and this is the Burlington weighted program. And then UMass, when she came on Friday, said that the average admitted GPA from Burlington High is, I think she said 4.2. From our scattergram data, it was a 4.0. I've become a huge fan of the mass transfer program. A to B means associates to bachelors, which is a two-year, associates is a 2-year degree to the 4-year bachelors, which means a student would do 2 years in the community college and then junior and senior year at the 4-year college, and they come out with the name of the 4-year college's degree. So you could go to Middlesex or North Shore Community College, apply to go to Tufts, do your last 2 years at that school, and then come out with the degree from Tufts. One of the cool, is it here? Oh yeah, it's free. So your first 2 years of community college in Massachusetts are now free, which is amazing. That's due to the millionaire tax that they put in a couple of years ago. We have 15 community colleges. I always remind my students that although Middlesex is down the road and it's a fantastic school, they can still choose which community college they want to go to. I mean, there's still a lot of agency here. Community college is still college. It's still challenging. And I try to eliminate language like, oh, I have to go to Middlesex. No, it's a great school. You can choose which one you want to go to. By the same token, some kids choose to go to Boston to Roxbury Community College, or which is now considered a historically black college, or Bunker Hill. So basically what you do is if you maintain the 2.5 in the community college and you've committed to staying on this transfer path, not only will you transfer into the college, and now I'm hearing that the transfers are actually pretty easy. You get a tuition credit plus the 10% Commonwealth Commitment Rebate, which they also call ComCom, and your tuition and fees are locked in for the class of 2020. What are you, Scholar? 20 from college, 29? Yeah, so they're locked in for class of 2029. Sorry, my math isn't great. And then the only exception is Mass Maritime and Mass College of Art, Mass College of Art would have a portfolio requirement. Mass Maritime might have some physical requirements because it is a service academy. So here's the nitty-gritty piece, right? We've narrowed down our college list. We've come up with our deadlines. You may be constructing a plan of attack, but now you have to do all of the little stuff involved in creating the application. Other than the essay, I don't think anything about an application is hard. It's just a lot, and it's kind of tedious. So while you're doing your research, we also want you to know, what are the deadlines? What colleges am I applying to November 1st? What colleges am I going to push off and maybe apply to in January? Are you keeping in touch with me and Ms. Leary and Ms. Murphy and checking in with us to make that plan? We need materials in advance from students so that we can help troubleshoot. We all have a requirement that we want students to meet with us 10 days before their first, that's the last day they should. That should be one of the last appointments. We want them to meet 10 days before that deadline, because if something's missing, we don't have a teacher letter, we want to be able to troubleshoot and get those materials in before the deadline. Students, in the meantime, though, can keep working on their applications up until the deadline. So we want you to meet with us. We want you to come to the senior group meetings. Please check your email. I'm hearing from my nephews in college, email is very much a thing in college. So you really have to just be email savvy and come up with your own organizational systems, and because we don't want you to miss anything. We also need students to use SCORE, which is our platform for sending materials. It's also how we track admissions data for upcoming classes. So SCORE, our platform online where we send all of the school-based materials. So students send the application, the fee, the essay, and we send the rest. So and I think there's going to be a slide spelling that out. We send the transcript, and we send more than one transcript. First quarter grades, last year's transcript, mid-year grades, the recommendations, and then some of the school forms, like we have a school profile, which describes Burlington High. Sometimes we have to include a secondary school report, which is created by the counselor. On SCORE, students can also look at graphing data called scattergrams of what the admissions data was for previous classes. So they can literally just see the math of where they stack up GPA-wise with accepted Burlington applicants, which is a lot more helpful data than the national average. You want to sort of measure yourself against other students who've been admitted because they're looking at our curriculum and our levels and all that. We'd love for you to sign up for college visits. I understand that some of them might be repetitive, but it does give you a chance to meet with the admissions officer one-on-one and ask specific questions related to you. SCORE also helps, and you do that on SCORE. SCORE also helps you track your deadlines. It helps teachers keep track of your deadlines, so teachers know whose letter of recommendation they need to focus on next. And we also share all the scholarship applications on SCORE as well. Oh, here's the slide I was talking about. I knew it was coming up. So you students send your application, the fees, essay. If you end up having to send any admissions testing data, that includes the SAT, ACT, and Duolingo, which is one of the English as a second language platforms that a lot of colleges recognize. Those things all have to be sent from separate websites. You would submit financial aid forms, which colleges will probably reach out to you about automatically after you apply. And then any other supplemental material. So for example, if a student's auditioning for Juilliard, they're going to have to send a headshot and a resume because they're an actor. So little things like that you would have to send. And then we send the transcripts, junior year transcript, which is the one in effect right now. We will send first year grades, probably in mid-November. It's the benefit of starting school in August. We have all those grades ready. Then we send mid-year grades to all the colleges where applications are still pending or where you've been admitted. And then that also includes a recalculated GPA. And then finally, you're technically admitted to college once they receive your final transcript showing that you graduated from BHS. Yeah. Oh, yes. So on the transcript we send in November, it spells out what classes the students are currently enrolled in, not only the ones for which they've received a first quarter grade, but the classes that they'll be taking second semester as well. Okay. So we have some nitty-gritty things. These are the things that they'll probably have to talk to us counselors about. They have to complete a FERPA waiver, which is the waiver. It gives us permission to send their information to the colleges, and also whether or not they want to waive their right to see their letters of recommendation in the future, which we strongly recommend that they waive. Some colleges also require it, and some teachers also require it. We want you to request your transcript, which is have that final meeting with your counselor 10 days before your first deadline. And then we want you to send your application. Now, this 10-day deadline doesn't mean you can't still be working on it. Your application doesn't have to be done 10 days before the deadline. You just have to meet with us and let us know how it's going, and then you can continue to work on it to your heart's content. So last year, 1,700 transcripts for the class of 2024. I was going to say, let's see if we can break that record, but maybe not. Anyway, now, Mrs. Leary. Oh, does anyone have any questions? I know I went kind of through. Yes? Yep. Yes and no. That's really something where the student, it depends on if the student disclosed it, but almost 90% of the time they can sit with the counselor and I can look at the students near their GPA or even the outliers and I can see who that student was. So for example, they might see an outlier who applied to a school they should have been admitted to, but they were denied. And then I go in and look and say, oh, that's because they applied for nursing or they applied for a 7-year medical program. So it was a very competitive major within a realistic school. So the kids can't see that data because it's confidential, but we can give them a sense of what it means and whether or not the kids around them. I just had this conversation with a student earlier about whether or not the students around them had applied early. Sure. The student will report that at the end of when they graduate, so we will get that data from them. So the class of 2025 isn't really included in the data. But yes, if a student's admitted, we ask them to share all of their admissions results upon graduation, whether or not they were denied, admitted, waitlisted. We want to track all of that stuff going forward. And also, I forgot to say, no matter when you're admitted, you don't have to make a decision about college until May 1st. That's sort of like an ethical guideline that all admissions offices have to adhere to. And also, the only exception would be if there was a crunch for housing and they needed you to put in a housing deposit early. Yep. That's a really good question. I mean, colleges will tell us, like the UMass Amherst rep when she was here last Friday talked about the competitiveness of some of the programs, what they recommend students do to strategize to maybe help themselves get in a little bit. So you can kind of get a vibe when the students meet with the college, and also the internet. Like some of those college websites like Niche and CapEx, I know they changed their name, can be helpful.
And another statistic that's reported is percent accepted. So that's a good telltale sign too of the competitiveness. So like an Ivy League or Harvard would probably be about like 60%, you know, whereas some of the mass public colleges and universities have been very good to Burlington high school students. That's probably, you know, they accept 50% plus at some of those schools. So that's a very good stat on that you can access on SCORE as well.
A 5. Sorry, so it's a 4.0 weighted, and that's a 4 or slightly above. No, so when I mentioned that we send the school profile, that explains Burlington High, and it explains how we grade. For example, it says right on the profile that sophomores are only allowed to take 1 AP. So they don't look at a sophomore and say, why didn't they take 3? We explain that. So when they get the profile for each school system, they look at our scales, and that's how they sort of compare across high schools. Okay. Oh, one more. You want to take it?
One more question? Sure. We have, as counselors, we have access to that. And the student, that's what the scattergrams is as well. I mean, that is years of data, but I have sat with students one-on-one, and I have looked at the data with them without revealing the information of the personal information of students. Yes. Yes. So just 1 year. So yes, we can look at that. We have access to that. You wouldn't be able to filter it to just 1 year, right? 3 years. A 3-year span, you would be able to see.
Mm-hmm. We also post on the site colleges that students have been accepted to. That is on our site now, although it hasn't been updated to reflect last year's class yet. So if you wanted to see the colleges Burlington students have been accepted to in list form, there's no statistics, just the names. But that's another avenue if you were just curious to see that.
And the scattergrams are beneficial to see how your student stacks up against BHS students who had the same weighting system with grades. When you're looking at national data for a college, it's more helpful to actually have the unweighted GPA, which we can always look up for a student if they need that.
Is there any benefit or drawbacks in taking the path and then going to the,
Are there any drawbacks? Is that what you're asking? Okay. Personally, I don't think so. So if you earn your associate's degree, if you do 2 years at a community college and you do the A to B program and transfer to one of the Mass state colleges and you earn your bachelor's degree, there's nothing on your degree that says did you 2 years at a community college or anything like that. Like, you're earning your bachelor's degree from that 4-year college. So in my opinion, there's lots of benefits in terms of, savings and things like that. But again, it's a personal and family decision about what's best for the student. Yep. To send an ACT or SAT score? Okay. We'll get to standardized testing in a little bit. In terms of components of the application, I know Ms. Diozzi did touch upon some of this information. The transcript remains the most important piece of the application, and it's the student's permanent academic record, of course. There are 4 different grids on the transcript, 1 for each grade level, so it does include final grades, the names of the classes, the level, and the credits earned for grades 9, 10, and 11. 12 is always a little bit different. So if we were to send a transcript before the middle of November, it would only include the classes and the levels for grade 12. And then once quarter 1 closes and those grades are finalized and get added to the transcript, we would send that updated transcript to any college a student has applied to for, say, an October 15th or November 1st deadline. We would send that as soon as it's available automatically, and the colleges can choose what they want to do with it, consider it, or whatever the case may be. And so you can assume that any November 15th or later deadlines will have the quarter 1 grades on there. So we really do emphasize the importance of starting senior year strong and maintaining strong grades throughout. Those quarter 1 grades stay on the transcript until the mid-year, and they are replaced with the mid-year grades. And at that point, we update the GPA on the transcript as well through the mid-year senior year. So it's still the end of junior year GPA that remains on the transcript all the way until early February. We do have 2 different types of transcript request forms. So all of the counselors have communicated this process to their students. We each use a different colored slip. So you might be hearing about pink slips, yellow slips. It does vary depending on the counselor. So students do need to turn in a colored slip to their counselor. General rule of thumb is 10 school days before their application deadline. And that document is what ensures that BHS sends their transcript and letters of recommendation. So you will likely hear about those at home. The second transcript request form is just for any other purpose. So it might be a scholarship they're applying to outside of BHS, or sometimes you need it for car insurance or whatever the case may be. That is just a generic form on the counter with our secretaries in the counseling office that they fill out, they put back in the bin, and they will usually have it ready for them to pick up within 24 hours. So 2 separate things. So the colored slips are specifically for their college applications, which allows us to submit electronically their transcript through SCORE. And then Ms. Diozzi mentioned the school profile, which helps colleges distinguish how our school is different from others when they're comparing students in their admissions meetings. So it includes all of these bullets that you see in front of you, including how we calculate GPA, how many AP classes we offer, and things like that. It's automatically sent with the transcript. The college essay is obviously an important piece. I will say it is often the last piece that students are finalizing before submitting their applications. So last year, counselors, we did share the Common App prompts with students, so they should all be aware of that. There's 6 specific prompts, and then the 7th one leaves it entirely open to students to write about whatever they would like. And in their junior year English classes at the end of the year, they did have an assignment that was a personal narrative, and students were able to potentially use that as their college essay. Many students do use it, and many students choose to write a completely different essay. It's a personal decision. Colleges also may or may not have supplemental questions, so that it's not required by every college, but it is something to be aware of and not leave until the last minute. A lot of colleges do like to ask, why is our school a good match for you? But some of them do have more creative questions as well that you should not leave until the last minute. You should make sure you're spending time on those as well. And we do post in our Google Classroom tips about the college essay, and we do cover it in one of our spring small group sessions. But some general tips is to be yourself. Don't write about what you think the admissions reps want to hear. And it's good to ask for advice from 1 or 2 trusted advisors, whether it's a teacher, a parent, counselor, and most importantly, always proofread, double check, use your spell check. It can't hurt to read it, but most of the time students are working on this on a separate doc, and then before they submit their Common App, they're copying it and pasting it into the writing section of the Common App. Recommendations are also an important piece. So last spring we gave students general guidelines, and typically what we say is to think about 2 teachers in core subjects, and then also recognize that from many colleges require a counselor letter. So a general rule of thumb we've always said is 2 teachers and your counselor. Excuse me. But that being said, every college is different in what they require. So it is up to the student to do the research, and the best way to do this is to visit the individual college websites, check their application requirements. So some students may only ask for 2 letters, and that's all that they need for their colleges, and that's okay. And some students may not need a counselor letter at all. But again, general rules of thumb is what we can sort of give to the students, but they do need to do their research for their colleges. Letting recommenders know their earliest deadline at least a month in advance. Always asking teachers in person. So many students asked teachers last spring for their junior year teachers. Some students might be asking this fall. So that should sort of rise to the top of their to-do list if they haven't done that already. Letters are automatically uploaded and sent via SCORE for any faculty members within the building. Anyone outside of BHS does not have a SCORE account. So digital or hard copies would need to, we can arrange this in our one-on-one meetings with the student how this will happen, but digital or hard copies that the recommender can send to us, we can upload to SCORE on their behalf. And we always recommend that students send thank you notes. You know, teachers and recommenders, they're not required to do this. They're doing it in their spare time. And some teachers may require a specific form that they ask students to fill out, and some may not. And we have provided students with a generic form for them to fill out and provide to teachers if necessary. And we also do have a parent or caregiver questionnaire that we can use. For me personally, over the years, I've made it a requirement for my students. So I found it really useful. But if it is something you would like to submit, then certainly you can reach out to your child's counselor. The activity list was an assignment that we created in Google Classroom last spring. So as juniors, they were just asked to submit basically a draft of their junior year activity list up until that point. And this year, we would ask them to just update it with senior year activities. And not every student might use this for college applications, but having done it last spring, it will make the activity section of the Common Application easier for them to complete. Common Application only allows a maximum of 10 activities. So it is helpful because it should be thoughtful in the way that students order them on the Common App. So having done their activity list last spring, it forces them to think about it, and then it allows them to organize their Common App properly. And also the activity list will definitely be required for scholarships this year. So if it's just one thing that if they've already done it, then it's done. They don't have to think about it. They just need to update it from last year. But there are some colleges that do allow students to upload a separate document for the activity list. If 10 activities is sufficient and they're able to convey their 10 activities on the Common App in that section, that's fine. But if they have a lot more than 10 and they feel like that section wasn't enough, then I would say take advantage of being able to upload that extra document. And Mr. Adebato, you will get into testing.
Any questions from that side?
Questions? The extra document? So it's not that common, but some call it, so the Common App, the Common Application, has an activity section, and students are only allowed a maximum of 10 activities that they can describe. If students have a lot more than 10 and they feel like, I'm struggling to figure out which 10 are my priority, and I feel like I have a lot more to say about myself, and a college does allow the upload of a separate document, then I would say take advantage of it and upload the activity list that we helped them create a draft of last spring. But otherwise, if they have 10 and that is a good picture of their overall activities, then that's sufficient. There's really no need to upload that separate document.
Okay, thank you. SATs and ACTs, this is something I've been working here since 2002, so I think the SATs and the ACTs have been something that has had some dramatic changes over the years. So it's a much different test now. The SAT itself is just over 2 hours, and it's digital only now. And then the ACT still offers paper-based, although they are piloting with online next February, and that's about 3 hours. So the test landscape has changed, and I think that, for post-COVID, a lot of the colleges that there was some colleges that stopped the requirement for a little while. A lot of those have now come back, but there's still well over 1,000 colleges that don't require either ACT or SAT. And so fairtest.org is the website where you can actually look at the list of colleges that don't require them. And I think in terms of individual colleges, looking at the individual college websites, you can certainly be provided the information about whether or not they're required. But that's why SCORE is a good program. And most college search programs will be able to let you know in kind of an easier fashion who requires and doesn't require the SATs. When to send scores, I should say when or if needed, because again, they don't have to be sent out. Usually students will take the SATs in spring of junior year or fall of senior year, or the ACT. There's an August SAT now that obviously was a couple of weeks ago, but here at the high school, we're going to offer an October, November, and December SAT. And in terms of sending the scores, again, this would be a good conversation to have with your counselor. Usually we're finding if students meet or exceed the SAT averages at a particular school, we would recommend sending if it is, even if it's not required, it's still okay to do that. You can certainly review your results before students decide to send the scores, so you have the opportunity to look at those scores. The last time a student takes the SAT, if they list colleges to receive that last set of scores, they get the college that receives those scores will get all the previous scores. So if you took the SAT in May and then you take it again in October and you send the October scores, they're going to get May and October. So just keep that in mind, unless you decide to do something called, it's test optional, right? Where you can just choose what individual test to send. So again, Common App, we usually tell our students, you can list the scores if a school requires it, but really the SATs or ACTs need to be sent by the student directly from the website. So just because you list it on a Common App, it's not an official score. They still want it from College Board or from ACT. So you need to make sure if you are sending it that you'd send it directly through each college website. Did you have a question? So super scores, if you scored a 500 on the math in June and then a 600 on the math in October, super scoring would be when a college just takes the higher score. So a lot of the colleges that we've spoken to over the years, they actually have software that when the scores come in, it automatically pulls in the highest two. All right, so colleges will, that's something that's called super scoring. And the same goes for ACT as well. They would take the highest scores. Oh, thank you. So we would obviously advise that all the testing be done by January, sometime sooner if you're applying to a college early. And SAT and ACT obviously have very comprehensive websites with a lot of information. You can certainly check that out if you choose to, see what the differences are between ACT and SAT. Again, we really talk about this more in the spring at our junior events and with juniors, because that's really the time when students are deciding on which test to take, not to take. There's, for students that are underclassmen here, Kaplan has a quick assessment you could take to see what you might do better on. But we often get, which one should I take, SAT or ACT? And again, I think that's a conversation you would want to certainly have with your counselor. And then I talked about this already a little bit, but again, test scores, students need to send them directly through each individual website. We suggest for both SAT and ACT, wait to see your scores. It does cost money to send the scores. You are able to send some if you elect the colleges when you're registering, but we very, very rarely have students do that. So in other words, when you're signing up for the SAT, if you decide right then and there what colleges should receive them, that would be a way to get out of paying per school, but very few students do that. Correct. Yeah, the score will automatically go. And the colleges will be finding out at the same time you are finding out on those scores. And again, reports, only the scores from the test date you designate. So that's more of an ACT thing, so that meaning you can choose what test score to send. So again, the SAT, ACT landscape has changed quite a bit. And, you know, I think it's worth it to really take a look at each college and what their requirements are. Usually, as I said at the beginning, if a student meets or exceeds the expectation, the average SAT at that score, we might recommend sending them. But I do think it's worth a conversation. And it's not an automatic like it used to be, sending SATs. It used to be an automatic just to send them. But again, we would ask you to have a conversation with your counselor and wait before you actually send them. And that is it for standardized testing. Does anyone have any questions? Yes. For UMass, we do. We have statistics that would be on our scattergrams. So if you were to look at our scattergrams through SCORE, which at the end, by the way, there's a form for parents to fill out if you wanted to get access to SCORE. You could see the averages. It's a 3-year average, but we didn't see a dip in acceptance rate in terms of, not submitting the scores. I think it was happening all over the place, not just in Burlington. Oh, thought there was a hand up there. Any other questions? Yes. The numeric value is still the same, between 200 and 800 for the English, 200 and 800 for the math, but there's no essay anymore. The essay is gone. It's very, very quick. For years I was used to being here on a Saturday till 2 or 3 o'clock. Now we're done by 11:30. So it has changed drastically. And again, that online component has really changed.
But the scores are also changed with the digital essay, right? Like, let's say some colleges say the average SAT used to be 1,500. But now I'm seeing kids are not getting up to that, right?
I think there's we're in a renorming phase, I would say. This is what, year 1, really, of the SATs, of the newer version. So reported averages, we're finding students that submit scores here, it's inflating our SAT average because it's just the students that score higher submitting. Do you know what I mean? So it's one of those things, it's new, and I think the data is going to kind of even out as time goes on. All right, Mrs. Murphy, you're up.
Thank you. Head over here. Okay, so communicating with admissions during the process and after the fact, it should be the student. So your student should be communicating with them directly. And then I always encourage my students to pick up the phone if you're having trouble accessing your portal on the college site. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone. They're there to help you. The admissions, the people that pick up the phone will help you direct you where you need to be. And then emails, we've been practicing this with our students for years. We want to make sure that they're well worded and they have a proper greeting and a signature, punctuation, capital letters, that type of thing. So that's something we're working on now and that they should continue to do when they're going through this process. And then we encourage students to see their counselor. If you're prepping for an interview, we can certainly help them sort of practice that and go over some questions. And we'd be happy to meet with them if they're prepping for an interview. Sometimes interviews are optional. I usually say if an interview is not optional, make sure that it's required for you, so you make it a point to do that to enhance your application. And then after students apply, Ms. Diozzi had mentioned this, the quarter 1 grades, they do go automatically through SCORE. So luckily, again, in mid-November, we send those automatically. The students don't have to request us to do that. And then the final transcript, which has all the students' final grades from senior year, that is sent to the college that the student is attending. So we don't send that to all the schools that they apply to. It's just the one that they're choosing to put the deposit down on. Track the status of your application. So once a student applies through the Common App, they have portals at the different schools that they applied to. So there'll be one for, say, Endicott, one for UMass Amherst, one for Trinity College. Each school will send them an email with their own login, their own credentials, and they're going to go through that to see if all their materials are received. So usually there's a green check for transcripts. Say they're missing a teacher letter, there'll be a red X. We can communicate with them about how to get that submitted. So they're going to be working through their portals once they submit their applications through the Common App or through the college's application on their website. Scholarship applications. So we use Scholarship America, and the local scholarships that meeting should happen around February. So that process will start. We'll start talking about local scholarships and all the money that is awarded to our students. And then if a student is deferred or waitlisted, so if they apply, say they apply early action and they're deferred, they're put back into the regular applicant pool. They can come talk to us about it. If they're waitlisted, same thing. Whether they apply early, if they get deferred and then waitlisted, or if they apply regular and are waitlisted, they can come talk to us and we can give them some advice, strategize with them on what to do going forward. Again, as I mentioned, May 1st, college decisions and deposits are due. Usually it's $500 at the school that the student is applying to, and the deposit only goes to one school. So you may not deposit to, say, 2 schools if you're still unsure. You sort of have to be, you have to be sort of positive that you're going to that school at that time.
We cannot send a final transcript to more than one college. Again, it only goes to one college, same thing as the deposit. And then one last thing with this, after the students apply, offers of admission are conditional. I'm sure we're all familiar with the senior slide, but unfortunately colleges do check up to see that you're continuing to maintain good grades as you finish. Even when you go out on your internship, you want to make sure that you get those final grades that are sort of indicative of what you had when you applied. Oop, okay. All right. And then other considerations for the student athletes, students that are playing a Division I or II sport, they can connect with us. We can help them with this process. They're usually going through the NCAA portal. We put the transcripts on there. Students must earn at least a 2.3 GPA in the core courses, and this is sort of all laid out for the student. They can touch base with us. It's not obviously going to be everybody, so we can help them with this process. They go through, like I said, the NCAA portal to request their transcript. That's right through that website. Again, this is separate from SCORE and Common App and everything, so they can touch base with us and we can help them with this process. And the NCAA permanently removed the SAT and the ACT qualifying score requirement for first-year Division I and II athletes. So while it may not be required for the sport itself, it may still be required for the college. Again, check the college websites individually to see what is required of them for their admission to their academic program. Students with disabilities, so colleges grant accommodations on a case-by-case basis. A lot of schools have their own sort of students with disabilities center, academic centers that help students with an academic plan or any kind of testing that they bring to the school. You want to check or meet with the individual colleges for specific guidelines and deadlines. So to get into a special program at a certain school, they may have a specific deadline for you to be accepted into that particular program. And so students applying to Massachusetts State Universities who submit documentation of a disability are eligible for exemption from the SAT and the ACT score requirement on that sliding scale Ms. Diozzi mentioned before about the GPA requirement. And students should discuss admissions testing and college requirements with us. So again, for special programs, say at Curry College, Westfield State, any colleges that have special programs for students with disabilities, they can come see us and we can help them with that process. And then a gap year, some of you may have heard of this before. This is time intentionally taken after high school, before college, so it's not like you're going to just get a job or whatever. It's generally for semester, outward bound, if you're studying abroad early, if you're volunteering or you're doing a language immersion program. So those are gap years, and we have, I know Mr. Adebato mentioned a link to all the schools that the students are attending, that have attended in the last several years. Similarly, we have a list of many available programs to students who are interested in maybe taking a year off before they go to school. And then lastly, it's strongly recommended, so if you're considering taking a gap year, we would like you to go through the process of still applying to college, because you can always defer. So say you get into college, you can defer that for a year. So they'll hold your spot, so to speak. Oh, and then, of course, financial aid, very important. We're going to hold Financial Aid 101 here in the auditorium October 17th. This is a really important one to take note of, from 6 to 7:30. So you'll get all that important advice about the cost and how to afford it. Several financial aid, MIFA is great. Several financial aid webinars are available through MIFA if you can't attend the event. That website is an excellent resource. And then December 10th from 4 to 6 is the FAFSA Festival. You get one-on-one virtual support, so that's very helpful too in terms of figuring out the FAFSA and all that. So the FAFSA will be available, I think, December 1st, I think we said. Yeah, so, previously it's been in October or January, but it's changed a bit, but I believe it is in December. So, any questions? Okay, Mr. Adebato.
The FAFSA Festival, that sounds exciting, but it's probably not, because it's financial aid information. So this is not a financial aid night, as you probably are aware, but we will have one next month. I would encourage you to attend. We are just going to go over a couple of things in regard to financial aid. some of the more important forms. This slideshow, we kind of updated these slides, and then the slideshow you have was printed previous to this update, but we plan to share this slideshow. So the FAFSA form, it stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. How many have heard of the FAFSA? I'm sure many of us have. It's changed. Last year it changed drastically. A lot of changes. But from what I hear, the process was actually, it was still, you know, a little bit tedious, but I think that it's changed for the better from what I'm hearing. The issue is in years past, it was available usually October. Now it would be, they're saying it's going to be available December 1st. They also said that last year, and it was not available till late December. They do have a test group. I don't know how they select it. You may or may not be selected, but it would be October 1st, and it's a limited group to kind of go through the process to work out the kinks of the program. And they did that last year as well. But again, the FAFSA has had a complete makeover from previous to last year. So those that haven't experienced the new FAFSA, again, you will this year. You remember the EFC, that was your estimated family contribution. That's a term that was used when the financial aid folks calculate what they think you can afford to pay. And once they figure out what they think you can afford, they look at the cost of the college and they try to come up with a financial aid package. That's now called an SAI. And MIFA, who you've heard a lot about, they actually have SAI calculators on their website. So you could certainly check out MIFA if you wanted to play around with that. The FAFSA, in completing the FAFSA, that makes students eligible for state and federal aid, financial aid. That aid can be merit-based aid, meaning grades. It could also be need-based, meaning a high level of need. So those are the ways that students can qualify through the FAFSA form. Other opportunities filling out the FAFSA, other things that provides, there's a federal Pell Grant and a FCEOG grant that is provided. I think that's like $4,000 a year. Again, that's based on need. They also have a program through a Teach grant if a student is going to school for education and then agrees to teach at a school, eligible school. Usually it's an inner city school. If you agree to teach there, you can get a grant through that. John and Abigail Adams, I'll talk about in a couple of slides. And then also that particular college or university, you may qualify for something through a particular college or university you're applying to through the FAFSA form. The other form that you are going to hear about is called the CSS profile. This is another financial aid form, but it is looking to see if a student would qualify for institutional funds at a particular college. It is not required, and you do pay for it per school. And it's mostly private schools that would ask you to complete this. It asks much more in-depth questions than the FAFSA form does. And again, this would be for institutional funds. That usually does open October 1st. So if you wanted to start to check that out, you could certainly Google it now and take a look at it. College Board, who does SATs, SATs, PSATs, and APs, they handle this as well, the CSS profile. So again, these forms are forms you're going to hear about. You should certainly look into. You can start that as soon as you'd like, if you haven't already. And then certainly at our financial aid night next month, we will be talking more in depth about that. And some colleges have financial aid forms through their own application process, so be aware of that. You would probably come across that as you're going through the application process. You heard Mrs. Murphy talk about local scholarships. So in addition to the financial aid forms, we also have local scholarships. So usually right around February, we will start posting local scholarship applications. So when I say local, I mean right here in Burlington, there's a lot of community organizations, sporting programs, memorial scholarships. Lots of people within this community offer scholarships. And we have different applications that students need to be aware of. And parents, this is when you can really help as well by continuing to kind of look at this information as the year goes on, but we'll eventually share a Google Doc with all this information. Scholarship America is a site that we use as well. Scholarship America, our students would set up an account with Scholarship America. It's similar to the Common App in that you just fill this out. You go into this program, you fill out a profile, and then you can apply to lots of, again, local scholarships. Oh, go back one, Emily. So last year, right here in the auditorium, there was about $350,000 awarded to about 160 seniors. All right, now we graduate 210, 220 students this year. I think it's 235. Obviously, not every student gets a scholarship, but we will all say you should still apply. They have scholarships for all different things, whether it be major, academic, sports. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the top 10% of the class either. It could be really, some of them are personality based. So again, we would ask you to really keep your eyes on the local scholarship applications. Adopt a Class is another one. How many parents have heard of Adopt a Class? So Adopt a Class is now the time to cash in, literally, in senior year, because all those volunteer hours that students have been doing over the years, that's all now calculated, and you could get a scholarship based on the number of hours that have been contributed. Any questions on the scholarships? Okay. So the MCAS, as you all know, students are required to take the MCAS test. Here at Burlington, our grade 9 students will take the science, and then in grade 10, they'll take English and math. So there are 2 academic-based awards based on MCAS scores. One is called the John and Abigail Adams, and one is called the Stanley Koplik. These are tuition waivers. So keep that in mind. It's a tuition waiver, and it's only to the Mass public colleges and universities. So basically, the John and Abigail Adams is if a student scores in the top 25% of their class, just in Burlington. If you're in the top 25% of MCAS scores, you would get a tuition waiver. You get a letter, and that actually is coming up probably within the next 2 weeks, we'll know. You'll get a letter in the mail that basically says if you go to any of the Mass public colleges and universities, you don't have to pay the tuition. Now, tuition is relative because, like UMass Amherst, for example, and I'm probably a little off on these numbers, but UMass Amherst is, the tuition is about $2,000 per year. The room, board, and fees is probably about $28,000. So you get the tuition, which is the $2,000, but still, multiply that by 4, that's $8,000, that's a savings, all right? The other option is the Stanley Koplik. That is a little bit more involved. Not everyone will qualify for that. It's not looking at the top 25%. It's looking more at if you've scored at least proficient on one test and at least advanced or above on the other test. So if you took 3 tests, of the 3, they all, 2 should be proficient and 1 should be advanced. And in addition to that, you would then need to do 2 extra things, which when I say 2 extra things, it could be take an AP test, 2 AP tests and score 3 or higher. It could be a dual enrollment class in an AP test. It could be an academic award. So the Koplik is a little bit more involved. There's usually questions on the Koplik. I'd be more than happy to answer them. And this is all on the Department of Elementary and Education's website as well. If you're a senior here now, we did mail out the Koplik letters last spring. So you would have received a letter in the mail if you qualified for the Koplik. If you don't know, you could certainly email me and I can check, but you would have received something in the mail. And you can use one or the other. So if you get both, it doesn't mean you can double up. So it's got to be one or the other. You can go to the next slide. We don't necessarily recommend you paying someone to research scholarships for you. You certainly could. I'm not saying you can't. I know parents have done it over the years. But just, we would ask you to use caution. Watch out for guarantees, that type of thing. Because a lot of information can really be found through research on your own. This is just something we want to make you aware of. selective service. So all 18-year-old male students must register in order to be eligible for state aid, but does not impact free community college. So it's no longer linked to the FAFSA, which for years and years it was. So if you have any other questions on that, you could talk to Ms. Diozzi, but it's no longer, it used to be linked to the FAFSA form for years, but that actually stopped, was it last year? Or 2 years ago? Yeah, 2 years ago. Was that the next slide? Yep, right there. All right, so I'm not going to go through bullet by bullet, but this can be stressful for seniors and parents. So we just ask you to kind of think about these things as you go through the process and have those discussions about college. You know, I think one thing I've found helpful over the years is student and parent come up with a time to discuss. As opposed to, I think what happens for seniors is they're hearing it, teachers, probably from us, from other students, family members, relatives, what are you doing next year? What are you doing next year? So I think it is part of the process, but at the same time, it can be a little stressful. So in terms of like the college process, maybe you want to find a time once or twice a week to discuss the college application process. Deadlines, parents can be a huge help with deadlines, reminding seniors what's coming up. That will really help come scholarship time. In terms of thinking about colleges, obviously, finances are a big piece of it. But again, through this process, students will be applying for financial aid and other types of financial assistance. So keep that in mind as you're applying to these colleges. But having a good, solid college list can help with that process if you have financial safety schools. Please don't call a college on behalf of your son or daughter. Don't email a college on behalf of your son or daughter. They should be the ones doing it. We hear that from reps all the time. I think we want to make sure our students are in the best light possible. So you could certainly call us anytime, but I think reaching out to a college with certain questions and things like that, you really want it to come from the student themselves. Last thing there, be a child's cheerleader. So you're going to get through the process. We see it every year. It can be a little stressful, but in the end, things will work out. There is a college for everyone. There is a pathway for everyone. So we would ask you to keep that in mind. Again, we like to alleviate stress as much as possible. Again, stress is a normal part of life, right? We have to all learn how to manage stress at different times. And this process, I think one of the best ways to alleviate stress is just to be organized about it. Coming to a night like this, students getting game plan ahead now, meeting with your counselor, all that will help down the road, especially as senior year goes on. And even when the senior slide starts to kick in, if you have all this done, that will just be one less thing that they'll have to worry about. And as always, you know, we support students with academics, with college, but we're also here to be social-emotional support. So if you notice anything in terms of issues with the social-emotional piece, you can, the process, you know, please reach out to us. Let us know. We are here to support your students. So again, communication, I think, is key. So everyone should have an evaluation form. We would ask you to fill that out. Can I just borrow that right there? So the evaluation form really helps us to improve, to give us some feedback. We would ask you to fill this out and leave it with us. You can leave it on the back table. The other thing is the score. There is a sheet for score. So parents, we would ask you to have your own account different from your child's account. Please fill that out. What will happen is we'll put your information in the system. You'd get an auto email from SCORE, and then you can access it. You as parents, you can even make recommendations for certain colleges. You can add colleges to your son or daughter's list, and then they can actually take it from there. So you can certainly feel free to do that. And that's all. So that concludes the night. We'd be more than happy to stick around. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask?